Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards. So, this is pretty exciting because we've finally reached beyond the 2010s, and we have finally reached the first year we're going to talk about in the 2000s. Yep, give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We're going back closer and closer to my childhood. Granted, we already kind of talked about my childhood a little bit in like the early 2010s, admittedly, but like as far as like my core childhood, we're starting to get into those years. It's pretty uncanny to say the least. But yeah, no, like I'm pretty excited to actually start getting into this because we're actually going to start finally be talking about games that I'm personally more interested in way more. Granted, that's already been kind of happening anyways, but since we've finally reached, the late 2000s, because again, we've been going backwards as opposed to going forwards, which, I mean, I guess either way, this is definitely going to make me excited to talk about this. Now, that being said, though, I will just kind of specify that, like, while I'm pretty excited to talk about, like, games from this decade, that does not mean I'm excited to talk about the Game Awards, the original Game Awards themselves. Because, I mean, I think I've made it pretty clear that, like, the Spike Game Awards from back in the day were pretty bad. Like, I've been pretty blunt about it. But as we're going to go deeper and deeper into the 2000s, it's going to get way worse. Like, again, you thought 2013 was bad? Well, let's just say that like this year in particular is definitely going to be where the cringe is going to really ramp up for us, because oh my god, this was actually a pain to watch. Obviously, we don't directly reference the original Game Awards as much in this show, but man, it was confusing, it was misguided. It didn't take itself seriously, although to be fair, when did the Spike Game Awards ever take itself seriously? Never. And honestly, it's just kind of representation of everything that was pretty bad about that decade. So, yeah, this is, at least in my opinion, one of the worst years as far as the Game Awards are concerned. That being said, though, 2009 was another pretty damn good year, and we've been getting into some pretty good years thus far. And yeah, no, 2009, I thought it was going to be like an okay year, at least in hindsight, because a lot of the games that I feel like I remember from around this time period were either from like 2007 or like 2010. But no, 2009 also had a lot of really solid games come out. Dare I say, it's also another good year that, like, it's definitely, skyrocketed into being another, one of the best years we're going to be talking about. I will say this, I don't know if I'd say this is I'd still say that 2010 is probably the best one we're going to be covering thus far. Followed up by 2016. But honestly, you could make me flip-flop between either this year or 2013. Though, I think I'm feeling right now, maybe 2013 is the better year, because keep in mind, 2009 had a lot of shitty movie license games and just, or just licensed games that came out that were pretty bad. Like, the 2000s, people tend to forget, was still, unfortunately, the era of the terrible movie tie-in game. So there obviously are exceptions to the rule. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that I had fun with the Lord of the Rings games on PS2, or, stuff like the Lego, or not the Lego, or I guess Lego games in general, or even stuff like the SpongeBob movie game from back in the day. But as far as I'm concerned, this was definitely one of the worst years involving that field. So do keep that in mind, that, like, it's not a perfect year, but definitely in the top 5 best years we've covered thus far. So that might change as we go along, because trust me, I'm really excited whenever we get into like 2004, 5, and 7 in particular, because I do consider those 3 years especially to be pretty good as far as video games are concerned. But the 2009 is not a year to scuff at all. So, but of course, I'm not really gonna try to explain any of this. Go watch our previous episodes on the Game Awards or our Game Awards show. It will just kind of help you guys like catch up with what we're doing. But either way, what I will, of course, remind you guys are, well, the categories. Well, I can confidently say that this is another year where we can actually have every single category be able to be used. So, which is pretty insane if you ask me. Because, oh my god, like, there were a lot of games. Some, admittedly, there were better, like, there were more stuff for certain categories than others, but overall, this is a really good sign. Like, again, like, you guys have probably noticed the pattern. Whether, you know, if a year either allows me to have as many categories as possible, or if a year allows me to have, like, a winner, like an individual winner every single for each category without repeating, that's another good sign. So, but yeah, no, as far as like I'm concerned, this is a pretty good ratio. But of course, let's go over the actual rules as the quick refresher. So, of course, you must have games released between January 1st and December 31st of that year. We're not the Grammys. We're not like, you know, the Modern Game Awards where they have weird cutoff dates. Like, we're not anything like that. So
don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
So we're not that. Obviously a game must have had a decent to good launch, though I think I'm going to change that starting with the next thing, because like that's not really going to be a worry from this point onwards. Like, we're only going to be doing games that have had good launches, because games with terrible launches were extremely rare from like going in and like going deeper into the 2000s. But I guess I just kind of kept that there as a just in case. Rule number 3, of course, no early access games. So yeah, no games that are in alpha, beta, or pre-alpha, because slight spoiler alert, Minecraft technically came out in 2009 in its very early stages, but because it wasn't officially released until 2011, we did not count that in this. We're not going to count that here. We counted that in the 2011 list. Go watch that if you're interested. As far as DLCs and expansions, we're only going to be counting DLCs and expansion packs for games that did not release in the same year, because especially from this point onwards, there's going to be a lot of DLC and expansion packs that came out that, you know, for games that came out years before this and are considered to be like, you know, some of the GOATs. So it's only for it to be fair. And of course, as far as game of the year, it needs to be a generally liked game to be accepted, and it has to be a completely new game with no remakes or remasters allowed. And then, well, obviously, last pick, these are only going to be games that I'm personally interested in that will be chosen, because that just matters to me a lot. So, but anyways, I know I'm going a little bit fast, because admittedly I started the stream late, which I do apologize. But I hope that kind of, you know, settles things. But in any event, let's begin this with, of course, best game by a new studio. So I always try to make sure that like I bring up games from newer studios that may not necessarily have been able to be given the proper limelight, but I do think would be a good time to at least, you know, give our commemorations for. This was not an award originally for the original VGAs. Excuse me, sorry. By the way, it will get really hot in here throughout this month, so I've been trying to stack up on water. So if I've been, or like Gatorade. So if I'm drinking stuff, I apologize. It's just to make sure that I get cool, because, well, you guys know how my room situation is. But anyways, as far as like Shit, I completely forgot my point. Oh yeah, because yeah, this wasn't originally like a category for the original Video Game Awards. As a matter of fact, they had the dumbest categories ever, like best game fueled by Mountain Dew, which is just like what? Like
How drunk are you?
I know, like it's stupid. I am not joking when I say that. That's actually an award that they had. Go look it up on the Wikipedia page. It's actually the dumbest thing in the world. Which again just proves my point that they did not take this seriously at all. So, and keep in mind, Jeff Keighley was still just kind of like a side writer at this point. He wasn't like the main host. As a matter of fact, this year didn't even have a host, which is even more bizarre, but I digress. Anyways, so as far as like, games that were starting to come out by big studios or even just by indie companies, I thought I didn't have enough, but I was able to actually gather just enough for this particular category. And truth be told, I think they're pretty good in their own right. So some of these I've definitely talked about, and of course one of them I've even played before. The game that I have played before is Trine, a puzzle platform adventure game that honestly is pretty underrated, I feel like, nowadays. Not a lot of people talk about it anymore. It's by Frozen Byte. And while, yes, this is not the first game that they made, this was actually the first game that like they got attention for, which is the whole point of the best game by a new studio. It's not your first game, it's the first game that got you attention. So, or at least positive attention. And so, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, Trine definitely deserves this nod, because it's such a beautiful game. Even like 15 years later, like, oh my god, it's so like vibrant. And even though I will admit it's a bit more on the basic side, it's still a fun, little, semi-cooperative platformer game that I would still recommend that some people check out. And well, speaking of platformers, the next game we got ourselves is Shadow Complex, which I guess I'm using platformer in like a loose sense with this game, though many people do consider this be a platformer, so I'll take their word up for it. I forgot who actually made this game specifically. Yeah, let me double check. Yeah, Chair Entertainment. That's who made this. And well, they eventually would make the Infinity Blade games alongside Epic. And yeah, no, like this game, yeah, it's a bit more Metroidvania style. So think, of course, like the post Symphony of the Night Castlevania games, the Shantae games, stuff like that. It's another one of those types. And well, I think I've exclaimed before that like that's definitely a type of game that I want to check out more on my own time for sure. And yeah, no, if you want like one that's a bit more sort of, realistic looking, Shadow Complex is a pretty good choice. And then we have Bayonetta. So yeah, this one is definitely an interesting one to talk about, because I think I pretty much made it clear that like I'm not the biggest fan of everything that Platinum Games has made. I knew I was gonna get shit for that. You guys can complain, but it's the truth. Because like, I don't know, it's just I do like some of their stuff. Don't get it twisted. I do genuinely think that there is talent behind the studio. I just feel like people put them on a too high of a pedestal at points. Especially when it comes to certain games like Vanquish or Metal Gear Rising. I'm not saying that the latter one is bad, but I just was not a fan of like those, at least in comparison to Bayonetta. Because with Bayonetta, you can see that like their strengths were being pulled out really hard with this game. Because this is a hack and slash. Which, of course, mid to late 2000s was a pretty big gaming trend at the time. but it was still able to stand out amongst the crowd, especially with its more suave and smooth out sort of, protagonist, of course, the titular character. And even just kind of having that sort of, heaven and hell done in, like, that Japanese anime style, it helped make it stand out, at least in comparison to your Devil May Cries and your God of Wars and stuff like that. And yeah, it definitely works in its favor. So, definitely a game I would recommend, and I might even play myself in the near future. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then last but not least, we've got Torchlight, which this is a Diablo-style game. As a matter of fact, this was actually made by like a bunch of, ex-Blizzard developers who used to work on the older Diablo games. So, as far as I'm concerned, if you want like a Diablo-like that isn't Diablo, but is made by the same developers, this is definitely your go-to. And yeah, no, like, as far as RPGs are concerned, it does that sort of, looting, dungeon crawling action pretty well. Like, I definitely would recommend it, especially if you want a more lighthearted and more cartoony, like, aesthetic to it. But of course, we all know the rules here. As much as I would like to give some of these, the nod, I can only choose one. So let's get into that. So here we go. Of course, you guys know it. You guys love it. Let's do it. So the award for the best game by a new studio for 2009 goes to Bayonetta. Yeah, as much as I really liked Trine, I think the objective answer is definitely Bayonetta. Again, this was, Platinum Games' first breakout game, and it showed that, you can still have that fast-paced hack and slash action that was very popular in that decade, while still being able to be fresh with it, with new movesets and the time clock ability, which time, that's what it's called, which is really fun. I will say, I only have one issue with this game, at least as far as that's concerned, is that the PC version, while it's not terrible, the controls can be a bit awkward, and so I would recommend you guys like plug in like a alternative controller whenever you're playing, Bayonetta, because yeah, that's unfortunately just something that is a bit weird with PC ports of a lot of these hack and slash games. But it's still a game I'd recommend, especially since, as I mentioned, with stuff like Witch Time, allows for so much more dynamic and engaging combat. And yes, while we can, all admit that Bayonetta is, well, definitely on the higher end of attractiveness, I still, even besides that, I still kind of find her intriguing, kind of being like a semi-rogue, angel-like character. And just kind of, the fact that she is basically, I don't want to say shunned, but just more so, like, outcasted in certain ways. And even if that doesn't intrigue you, you can't deny that, like, the bosses in this game will kick your ass at points. Especially the last boss, because holy shit, that thing's definitely a beast. So, but yeah, regardless, Bayonetta I would definitely recommend, though definitely make sure that, like, if you're, a teenager, just don't play this game whenever you're around your parents. That's all I'm going to say. So, it's still a really good game. It's a bit more on the spicy side. I mean, just look at the cover art, but I don't think I need to explain. But then that leads us into action-adventure, which do not include platformer games, actually. That is its own separate category now. I forgot to change that on the thing. And yeah, I apologize for that. So yeah, no, platformer games, they're now its own category, so that we don't have to really worry about, them conflating with action adventure. Now, that being said, this was a category at the Game Awards for 2009. So I guess the real question is, did they get it correct? Yes and no. So, okay. I don't think this is the best selection of games here. Let's start off with, I'd say, is probably the most obvious one. Brutal Legend. Why is this here? Well, okay, I know why it's here. Because it's a game by Double Fine, and people love to praise. Double Fine's another one of those studios that people love to praise the high heavens, even though like they're only really average at best. But it is what it is. Oof. But that being said, though, okay, I have a story to tell about this game. I've never played it myself because I think the concept's kind of dumb. But I remember, like, I think it was like 2 years ago. I was in a VC on Discord, and I was there with I was in a Discord call with a few of my friends, and one of them was playing this game. Because Double Fine. Also, Jack Black is the main character, and yeah, the other friend. I'm keeping them anonymous, by the way, because I think it's funnier that way. But as far as they were like playing this game, which, okay, by the way, this game starts off in a very bad light because this game is basically like, I'm just gonna be frank, it's jacking off to like, classic 70s and 80s metal. Like, that's just the story of this entire game. The game starts off by shitting on like, both emo and new metal bands that were popular at the time. Rude, actually. I know there were some emo and definitely a lot of new metal bands, like, in both genres that did not age particularly well. Go watch our tier lists involving both of those genres. But it's like, dude, are you really gonna do that? And what makes that even worse is that, like, as much as this game doesn't want to admit it, but like, 10, 15 years later, those genres are now like as popular, if not more popular than ever. So that's a great start. A game shitting on music genres that are that's now cool to like. That definitely didn't age your game poorly. But also, I remember, while my first friend was, playing this, we got like an hour, I think, in to like the first RTS section, and we were watching the cutscenes, and then the other friend that I was watching, and keep in mind, they love like Psychonauts, they love like other Double Fine games. They then just straight up commented like, dude, this game looks like ass. Oh, that, like, it's like they just started complaining about the game. Like, I didn't want to say anything until they started saying it, because I thought the game looked terrible too. Like, holy shit. This is a game that, like, here's the thing. This is a game that's from 2009, right? The game looks like it's from 2001. So, like, it looks 5 years out of date. Minimum. And again, this is just an example of another game that only got nominated because it just made sense at the time. Like, because again, this game got popular because, well, A, Jack Black, B, Double Fine, and C, because, back in the day, it was still cool to shit on, newer rock genres, which is pretty pathetic and sad if you ask me. Even though like I don't really consider myself a big fan of like new metal music anymore, especially after that tier list that I did with my friends. Oh my god, it like trust me, that was terrible. I'm not gonna shit on anyone who does like that stuff. So that's a pretty bad. Yeah, again, it just made more sense at the time. So biggest L on this. That being said, it should be pretty obvious where I'm gonna go with this next one with Batman Arkham Asylum. Again, if you like Batman, the Arkham games, that's completely fine. It's just not really my thing. And I can say that because I did play Arkham Asylum on my PS3. Zombie Slayer, Dylan, he brought the game over to my house at one point and he made me play this. And yeah, I didn't particularly care for it like as much. Again, it's not bad, it's just not really my thing. Because again, I'm not really the biggest fan of superhero media. So I guess to be fair, Batman is a bit different because, like, there's some media where it's a bit more grounded, but I don't know. It's just, I just never really cared, like, a lot for, like, superhero media all that much, with a few exceptions. So that's just my opinion. And then we've got Uncharted 2 and Assassin's Creed 2. Both sequels to pretty iconic games that made their mark back in 2007. And yeah, they're pretty good. I played through Uncharted 2 twice, and yeah, no, I still think the game holds up to this day. At the same time though, I don't think this is the best category for it. Because again, this is more of a shooter game, a third-person shooter. It is an action-adventure game, but I think it makes more sense to have this be more of a nod for third-person shooters rather than, just general action-adventure. At least in my opinion. So, good game. Really good game. I don't know if this is the best category for it, though. And of course, Assassin's Creed 2. I mean, I don't think I really need to say anything else because, well, not only was this, a much improved sequel in comparison to the first Assassin's Creed, but, well, it was also the winner for this particular one. Which, if I'm going to be honest, out of these nominees, this is probably the one that I would have chosen as far as what I would have chose for, being the best in its own category. Like, you know what I mean? So that's at least my stance, because this game's exploration is so much fun. The actual like combat and mission structure is hella improved compared to the first game. And yeah, overall, I do consider this to be a much, overall better game, which I might check out later this year. Nudge. But yeah, what would I actually choose instead? Well, truth be told, 2009, there were a lot of really good games that came out that year. And it shocks me that none of these were nominated for Best Action Adventure Game. Like, obviously, Bayonetta, I already explained why that should get a nod. Fair enough. But then we also have, two, at least in my opinion, I guess, better representations of like superhero media. So let's start with Infamous. Now, this one I am going to admit I am a little bit biased for, because, well, Infamous, for those who don't know, was made by a little known studio. They're called Sucker Punch, right? And they may have worked on like, a certain franchise, that I particularly adore. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But you get the point. Is, granted, obviously, I would have preferred if they were who have made, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, as opposed to Sanzaru, but they wanted to change things up for the next consoles. Fair enough. And well, Infamous, I will definitely say, is actually a lot better than I was thinking. Like, it was definitely a lot like better than I was thinking it was going to be. Because like, I haven't really heard too many people talk about Infamous, like really at all. I feel like it's more of a general like cult classic or even just a straight up sleeper hit. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, like if you want to play as like a superhero with basically force lightning, this is definitely your game. And yeah, this was definitely it also helps that this was kind of the beginning of whenever like Sony was starting to kind of turn around from the backlash that they got from the launch of the PlayStation 3. Because keep in mind, back in 2006, the PlayStation 3 was not received well at all because of its price point. It was way too expensive for people to buy. And it wouldn't be until 2009 where they actually made a cheaper model that was half the price of the original, where they started to finally get better like reception. And it was games like this and Uncharted 2 that kind of helped bring the PlayStation 3 back. I say that also with love because again, I love the PlayStation 3, but even I had to admit, yeah, it was way too expensive. $600 for a console in 2006. That is ridiculous. So again, that's like the equivalent of like $800 or $900 today. So, hell no, as far as that price. But hell yes to this game. And you know what else is also pretty funny? There was another superhero game about an edgelord guy that came out that same year. Prototype. Now, okay, this one is more, I guess, less of a superhero game and more of an anti-hero game. Or just a straight up, supervillain, depending on how you play the game. Yeah, no, this game is a weird one to talk about. I will definitely say, I don't think it's as good as Infamous, but it's still a game that, like, I respect. Because, this was an open world, basically this demigod simulator game where, yeah, you basically unlocked a bunch of, like, mutant abilities where you can actually, change into different like enemies or just rip the earth straight from your hands and shit like that. Like you do some pretty insane stuff in this game. And as far as like, the superhero like subgenre of, action adventure open world games, this is definitely a good competitor to Infamous. So I would still recommend it. If Infamous isn't your vibe, then Prototype might be. But let's get away from the more rated T and rated M games. And let's talk about Mini Ninjas. Which, it's funny because I remember the ads for this game back in the day on Nickelodeon. So, guess who made this game? I'm gonna give you guys a few seconds. What if I told you that Mini Ninjas was made by the same people who made the Hitman games? Like, okay, maybe that's not the best one. Because that makes it sound bad. But yeah, no, like this. Doing my research, I was shocked. I genuinely didn't like. I remember seeing Mini Ninjas back in the day because this was all over like commercials back in like the late 2000s for Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. I remember seeing ads for this game all the time. But yeah, no, this is made. Yeah, Mini Ninjas. This was one of the games that IO Interactive was making while like they were on hiatus from Hitman. Well, this along with the Kane Lynch games, but let's be real here. Kane Lynch's ass, so no thanks for those two games. This game is surprisingly a pretty fun action adventure, which is weird because you would think that, because it's made by IO, you would think it would be a stealth game, but it's not really a stealth game. It's more of just a general action adventure. It's not a platformer. But yeah, it's just more of a kid-friendly version of, I guess something like, not really Onimusha, but games something in vain to that. Like, but yeah, no, this game, it has a unique art style, and while I will definitely say this game doesn't really reinvent the wheel, it's still a pretty good kids game for all it's worth. And you get to play as like multiple characters. You don't just play as the main shinobi right there. You also get to play as those two back there, as well as 3 other characters, each with their own distinct gameplay styles. And while yes, definitely there are some that are definitely better than others, it offers enough variety for you to be able to just have a really good time. So yeah, I would definitely give this game a nod. And then I'm gonna give one last nod to the Saboteur, which this one came out unfortunately a bit too late for the VGAs to see. But as someone who, of course, is a bit of a World War II game fanatic, I wanted to give this game a bit of an honorable nod, because this is a GTA style World War II game where you have to play as the French Resistance trying to liberate Paris during the time in which the Nazis were pretty much under occupation. That's a pretty cool concept. And what makes it better is that this is actually made by another really well-known studio from back in the day that made another pretty big game to me. Studio's name's Pandemic Studios. They made the old Star Wars Battlefront games. So yeah, suffice to say, this was definitely a showcase of their talents. Unfortunately, though, this would be their last game, because I think actually like the day before, or literally around the time that this game came out, they would unfortunately file for bankruptcy, and they would cease as a cease to exist as a studio. So like, yeah. Okay, let me phrase it. Not bankruptcy. EA shut them down, because EA just loves shutting down shitty companies. So yeah, fuck EA. But yeah, no, like, I would still recommend you guys check it out. And also, this game just recently got a re-release on Steam. So if there's any time to get into the Saboteur, it'd be now. Unfortunately, as you guys know, only one winner. So let's, of course, reveal said winner. So here we go. Let's get into this. So, the award for the best action-adventure game of 2009 goes to Assassin's Creed 2. Yeah, even I have to agree with the choice in which the Game Awards gave. Because, well, I mean, at least out of those choices, this was probably the best one, at least of their original choices. You can definitely argue about my personal picks, but I'd still think that this is probably the best choice overall, because especially when you compare this to the first game. I still really like the first game. I played through that game 2 years ago. I still think the game is pretty fun, but admittedly, it can be a bit repetitive. This game removed a lot of like that repetitiveness with, having just general better level design, more varied level like mission objectives. It also has a way better protagonist, Ezio Auditore, being definitely, I'd say, the most iconic character in all of Assassin's Creed, for a good reason. He starts off as a wise ass in the game, but he obviously grows to become a much better character over time, and he's definitely more fleshed out in the subsequent games that came after this. But even in this first game, he's pretty cool. Also, this game added in much, much, much better side activities compared to the first game, because, oh my god, the first game's side activities were just relegated to finding flags and saving civilians. That's it. They finally added in a bit more variety by having the races. There's also some other stuff I can't really think about the top of my head. Oh yeah, there's a lot more like places where you can actually look for loot. And so yeah, like they've added in a much more variety of stuff. Also, the cities feel way more unique in comparison to the first game. Because with Assassin's Creed 1, I will admit, Jerusalem, Damascus, and Acre, they really didn't feel all that different from each other, other than like their color scheme. With Damascus, it's pretty orange. With Jerusalem, it's pretty green. In Acre, it's pretty blue and gray. But with these cities, with Venice, obviously since it's a city with a bunch of canals, it's a lot more water driven as far as it's walking around there. As far as your homestead, which to be fair, Arcia in the first game was the most unique location. Not much going on there, But your homestead is a lot more customizable. You can actually add in more, shops and stuff so they can actually build up your income. Your home city is a bit more of just a straight up urban environment. And then there's also another city that I forgot the name of, but it's basically like half the countryside and half like a little town, which, I mean, let's be real here, may not sound the most unique, but for Assassin's Creed, and really just a lot of other quasi-open world games, yeah, no, that was definitely a step in the right direction. Like, the cities felt more unique, other than just the color tone of them, and like, who's controlling. So, yeah, and yeah, because of like those, this helped raise the standard for open world and quasi-open world games to come from this point onwards. And I have nothing but high respect for this game as a result. Alright, next category. Platformers. So, the newest category in this race. Obviously, not necessarily this was not at the Game Awards, but we're still gonna do it anyways. And I will admit, 2009, as I was alluding to last time, late 2000s was not the best time to be a platformer game, because they were starting to become a bit more of a dying breed. That being said, though, I still found a decent enough amount of games that could, be nominated for this. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a pretty good roster that we got here. So obviously, Trine and Shadow Complex, I'm going to nominate still, because I still think that those games are pretty good in their own right. But I'm also going to nominate a Nintendo DS game, Scribblenauts. So you guys remember me playing Scribblenauts Unlimited, right? Back in 2022, I believe. Well, suffice to say, that was not my introduction to Scribblenauts. The original one was, because my cousins actually had this game, and I can definitely see the appeal of this original first draft. As far as I'm concerned, Scribblenauts, for those who don't know, it's a platform adventure hybrid game where you get to basically solve puzzles and do a bunch of problem solving for each area by coming up with your own creative ways through your notepad. So you basically come up with the solutions yourself, which adds a lot of creativity to especially for a genre that isn't really well known for having a lot more creative opportunities. Scribblenauts was definitely a game that helped cover for that. And this game, especially for the DS, was a pretty enjoyable little experience to play back in the day. And I would still recommend you guys check it out. If not this, at least the 2012 Scribblenauts Unlimited, especially since, there hasn't really been a new game in the series since. So, I mean, there was DC Unmasked, but again, I don't really care for that. And Scribblenauts Battles, what even is that? So, as far as I'm concerned, the original Scribblenauts still holds up. And then, of course, that leads us into Ratchet & Clank, A Crack in Time, which, yes, innuendos were still pretty keen in the Ratchet & Clank series, even up until this point. So this was the conclusion, or at least the official conclusion, to the Ratchet & Clank Future Trilogy that was in the late 2000s. Sort of the continuation of the original series from PS2. And as I will fully admit, I am much more of a fan of the original trilogy as opposed to the Future Trilogy, but that's not to knock the Future Trilogy at all. I still think that those games are quality titles that I could still recommend, though I will caution people, if you came from the PS2 era, expect it to be a bit more, appealing to a younger crowd. Because that's essentially what Insomniac did. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it is kind of reflective of just kind of what they were doing at the time. Because obviously, while they were working on this, they were working on the Resistance games, not Infamous, Resistance, which was way more mature than even the original Ratchet & Clank trilogy. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this was probably the best way they could have balanced that out. And it's still a really good, time. So I'd recommend you guys check it out. And then, well, again, 15-year-old me would be yelling at me right now, but I gotta say it, the new Super Mario Bros. For the Wii, pretty solid experience. So this is obviously the indirect sequel to the new Super Mario Bros. That was on the DS. This is actually, the name implies that it's a a port. It's not. It's actually a sequel. So therefore it counts. And yeah, as far as Mario games are concerned, again, this one didn't really reinvent the wheel all that much, but I would still say that it's, a pretty enjoyable enough experience. Just don't expect this to be on the same level as Super Mario Galaxy. So just lower your expectations a little bit, and you would still have a really fun time. Let's get on to what we've got to think here. I'm going to be drinking these a lot so that my throat's not going to hurt as much. Just as a bit of a fair warning for everyone. But yeah, here we go. So, best platformer game of 2009 goes to Ratchet & Clank Future, A Crack in Time. I was originally hesitant on actually adding this to the best platformer because, again, just like with Uncharted, this game is also a third-person shooter. But this was around the time whenever they were really honing in on the platformer elements of Ratchet & Clank. Because at least in comparison to some of the other PS2 era mascot games, this one I definitely would say fits the bill a bit more in that department. Just with a more, action adventure third person shooter, mix. But as far as a continuation / sequel, and it's just sort of an ending to this trilogy, this is definitely the best way they could have ended this, this particular wave of Ratchet & Clank games. Obviously not to get into spoilers, I would recommend you guys play it for yourselves, though I would also recommend you guys check out the older Ratchet & Clank games for context for this game, because admittedly, if you don't do that, you might get lost. But rest assured, as far as, this game is, it's pretty fun. It actually has, dare I say, the best Clank sections in any Ratchet and Clank game. Even better than Going Commando. And I already thought Going Commando's Clank sections were pretty good. So, yeah, as far as, improving those sections, they did a pretty good job. And, of course, as with any Ratchet and Clank game, the weapons and the gadgets are as fun as ever. A lot of them still being pretty unique to this game. Some being brought back from previous Ratchet and Clank games. And, well, as far as I'm concerned, this game has some of the best level design in any of the games in the franchise. There is a good reason as to why people do consider this to be, if not the best, amongst one of the best Ratchet and Clank games. And, well, I can say for certain that, the enemies and the boss fights do feel a bit more fair. It's not just completely lopsided. Like in some of the PS2 games, like Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal, admittedly. Because, yeah, those boss fights are pretty easy. So, but as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, Ratchet and Clank Future definitely does deserve at least to be given a bit of a nod. Because I will admit, I remember, the Future games were not really given as much respect for a long time. And it wasn't until, I'd say, recently where people started to, really, really give the Future trilogy a lot more respect. And it's mostly warranted. And I do respect this game being able to, kind of continue on the legacy. Even if, of course, Ratchet and Clank as a series would continue on and later down the line. All right. RPGs, role-playing games. So, this one's going to be another interesting one to talk about because 2009 was a pretty good year for RPGs, I would say. There were a lot of RPGs that came out this year that I thought were pretty insane. How did the Game Awards respond? Actually, not too bad. You can definitely argue that there could be a better selection, but I'd say this is okay enough. Of course, let's start with Demon's Souls, the first, confirmed Souls-like or Soulsborne game. Okay, yeah, Demon's Souls is a weird one. Because, again, this game came out, it was a pretty unique game at the time, though this might actually sound weird to some people. Demon's Souls is technically not the first Souls-like game, or at least it's not the first, it's not really technically the first, game that, that's super hard and if you get hit in if you get hit twice or three times you're dead. This isn't really the first game to do that. Hell, this isn't even technically the first FromSoft game to actually do this. But this was the first game to kind of, bring to light to that sort of gameplay style. And while yes, I do agree that as far as establishing that sort of, style, and how even kind of inadvertently starting the Dark Souls series as we know it, I would argue that Demon's Souls hasn't particularly aged the best. It's not a bad game, but compared to Dark Souls 1 or even 3, it is a bit janky. So, especially if you compare it to Elden Ring, oh my god, it's night and freaking day. Or even the remake in most cases. So yeah, that's at least kind of my hesitancy with Demon's Souls, is that I would not recommend this being your first Soulsborne game ever. I do have an unsealed copy of it. I do have a sealed copy of it on my shelf. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, next to my copy of Far Cry 2. So like I have an original like copy of this game, or at least original North American release, because this came out in February in Japan, but in October in North America, which is why it's first. But yeah, you get my point. Is that like, at least from what I've been told, it's not the best to start off with. Dark Souls 1 or Elden Ring are much better options, or even Bloodborne, as far as like From Software Soulsborne games. So that being said, I still do respect for what it was able to accomplish, because again, this is the first game that like at least popularized the idea of a Soulsborne game. So I gotta give credit where credit's due. Next up, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Is this an RPG? Okay, I actually don't know, because I was confused as to what, because I thought this was like another like adventure platformer game. Like I could have sworn. I will say, okay, I guess it is an RPG. Weird. Again, I've never played it, though I do remember this. I do remember the commercials for this game freaking everywhere as well. So, but suffice to play, I can't comment on this because I have not played it. Though people were excited because it turns out, like, you know, Nintendo's making a sequel to this game, which for those who like this game, fair enough. I will say, this game has like the most epic boss music ever for some weird reason. Like, I'm not going to play it for you guys because I don't want to, like, I don't want to get copyrighted by Nintendo. But yeah, no, like the final like fight music is surprisingly pretty epic. Hold on, let me see if I can hear myself. Yeah, like it's the most epic music ever. It's very late 2000s like boss fight music, but like yeah, no, that's I will give them that. Soundtrack wise, bravo. Granted, we don't have like a best, soundtracks category, because admittedly I'd rather do that for like a potential Caspian Music Awards thing, but like as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, like this game has a really good soundtrack. So that's all I really got to say about this. Okay, Borderlands. So, Borderlands 1. Okay, so this one's also another game where it's like, I do respect it, but I honestly can't really comment on this game because I have not played the first Borderlands 1. I played 2 and I played this pre-sequel, but I've not played 1. So, I will have to admit, I feel like it would be extremely disingenuous if, like, I just nominated this. So, but okay. It also just kind of comes from the fact that, like, I don't know if I'd be interested in this game as much. Like, I'm a bit 50-50 on Borderlands, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll change my tune at some point, but I don't know. I feel like this one, I don't know. I guess it just comes from my hesitancy towards Gearbox as a company, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they're like a terrible video game studio. They've done some decent work here and there. It's just, I feel like this is just kind of a part of, like, a mixed bag of games that they've released that people tend to praise. Like Brothers in Arms, for example. Obviously, tomorrow I'll be doing Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway, which I actually enjoy. But the first two games, people praise a lot, and I think those games have aged very badly in a lot of ways, at least in comparison to, the final game in that trilogy. And it's not just that, though. I just feel like a lot of Gearbox Software's games, I feel like I hear more bad than good. I.e., Duke Nukem Forever and Aliens Colonial Marines. two of considered to be some of the worst shooter games of all time. Also, they also, helped publish Godfall, which is one of the most forgettable RPGs ever made. So I am just very hesitant when it comes to Gearbox as a whole. So, and I'm just kind of mixed with Borderlands. So that's at least where my hesitancy comes from. So that being said, though, even if you disagree with me on that, you cannot deny that Dragon Age Origins deserves to be on this list. Dragon Age Origins is amazing. Like, I would definitely say that it's probably the best choice on this list. It's aged pretty good. No pun intended. And it's good. It's old school BioWare we're talking about. And pre 2012 BioWare, most people would say pretty Kino era. I said it again, I'm sorry. Which should not surprise you. It ended up winning. Fair enough. But what would I have chose instead? Because I said this was a pretty good year for RPGs. Where are the other RPGs? Here they are. So, even though I am hesitant with Demon's Souls, I think it still only makes sense for us to have it as a nod. Because at the end of the day, it did start a whole genre of games. And without it, Dark Souls wouldn't exist, and Bloodborne wouldn't exist, and Sekiro and Elden Ring wouldn't exist. So as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty important to have this game on here. So, and also, well, speaking of, I know Shadow of the Erdtree just recently released for Elden Ring. So, yeah, without this game, that wouldn't exist. So, thank Demon's Souls for this. Of course, I'm also going to nominate Dragon Age Origins, but I'm also going to nominate Torchlight here. Again, Diablo style, makes sense. However, I'm also going to give a good nod to two other JRPGs here. Dragon Quest IX and Monster Hunter Tri. So, Dragon Quest IX, this is another interesting game in its respective franchise. Because, at least from what I gather, in the late 90s to about the mid 2000s, Dragon Quest was kind of in a rough spot. At least from what I've gathered. I guess sort of the license IP wasn't doing as well as it was doing back in the 90s. I'm not too sure, but at least from what I can tell, this was a return to form within its respective franchise. And if that's the case, yeah, I'd say this is definitely a good, follow-up to a long-running franchise. Definitely better than Final Fantasy 13. So, yeah, if you want, a more classic-style JRPG experience, Dragon Quest IX's got you covered. And of course, that leads us into Monster Hunter Tri, or Monster Hunter 3, as I typically just kind of prefer to call it. This was actually a Wii exclusive, which is actually a big deal, because, well, this is 2009 we're talking about. I'd say starting from, this point onwards, the Wii was getting a lot less attention than it was in the first 3 years of its life cycle. 2006, 7, 8, Wii, pretty, talked about. A lot of the games that a lot of people love came from that era. 2009 was sort of kind of the beginning of that waning period for the Wii, at least from personal experience, and just kind of seeing other people's opinions online. And, well, part of that is because, well, there weren't really a lot of third-party games that were being produced for the console, but also there wasn't really a lot of variety of genres. But thankfully, as far as the RPG category is concerned, Monster Hunter 3 was able to bring up the console a little bit more life. It is pretty stupid, though, that Monster Hunter 2 was never released in North America, at least in hindsight. But at least it's good to know that they at least, brought the third game in. And yeah, it's pretty fun. Definitely I would say overlooked, at least in comparison to some of the more recent entries in the Monster Hunter series. If you want a more classic era Monster Hunter game, this is definitely, I'd say, the most accessible game in that regard. Because with Monster Hunt, the original Monster Hunter, some of the features aren't really unlocked anymore because servers were shut down. So, but this game would definitely suffice as far as like, getting your bang for your buck. So go check out Monster Hunter Tri if that interests you. And then last but not least, a bit of an underdog one, but I'm also going to give a bit of a little bit of respect to Divinity 2. Now, obviously, yes, this is a part of the original Divinity series that would eventually spawn in the original Sin games. But at least from what I gather, this game was an improvement, at least on a visual and gameplay perspective compared to the first Divinity games, because the first few Divinity games were more, they were basically just like 90s, isometric RPGs made back in the early to mid 2000s. And so they kind of felt dated by that point. This game pretty much was an improvement on that. So as far as I'm concerned, I would still check it out if this is a game that interests you. That being said, though, I am hesitant to fully give this game a nod, because at least from what I can tell, this game had some issues that people had, including when it comes to the leveling system and just not really having the greatest story of all time. So you can honestly convince me to swap this out with Borderlands in the future. If you want to, feel free to do so. I guess I just feel more comfortable with this because I'm just more into fantasy games in general, and Divinity is a series that I definitely have a bit of respect for. So that's at least where I come from with Divinity 2. But let's get into the winner. So here we go. The winner for the best RPG game of 2009 goes to Dragon Age Origins. Yeah. This should be, I don't want to say it's obvious, but yeah. This is, at least in my opinion, the best out of the bunch. So, yes, obviously this was another big streak for BioWare as a company, because obviously they produced Mass Effect, and they produced KOTOR and the first two Baldur's Gate games. And so just to have their own original fantasy IP be another successful series was a pretty big deal for them. But also, even just kind of the innovations that this game had, they weren't like huge innovations. They were just so kind of like more, subtle things, like the branching character paths. This game doesn't really have multiple endings, but it has more just kind of multiple character endings, if that makes sense. Like a lot more dynamic stories that were told through the characters. And while that would be more fleshed out with the Awakening DLC, that was still kind of a cool thing to see. Also, like I said, this was a new IP, and so having this fleshed out fantasy setting, that was completely theirs, was definitely a fun experience, even if it is pretty derivative of other franchises. It's still able to kind of make it its own. There's tons of course, as with any RPG, there's tons of items and loot and stuff like that. So as far as I'm concerned, pretty good in that respect. Also, the sort of like the looming threat of the game, being the sort of demonic, race that's trying to come out, like it makes me like a demon and an orcish race. if like an orc and a demon was like a hybrid, that's a pretty at least somewhat unique take on the orc thing. And again, while I am describing this in like broad strokes, it's mostly because this game, it doesn't really like change much compared to like what they were doing with Mass Effect or even like the Knights of the Old Republic games. Like this game did not reinvent the wheel, but it was definitely a game that just did what was very effective from Mass Effect and just applied it into a fantasy setting, which is a setting that I much prefer, and honestly is partially why I do consider this to be BioWare's one of their best games, alongside Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, this is definitely a really solid entry to an otherwise pretty good franchise, and of course establishing said franchise. So, all right, best shooter game. So this was definitely a category for the original Game Awards. So you can probably tell where this is gonna go. But at least for me, I would definitely say that it's not going to be as bad as you guys think. Because 2009 was actually a pretty decent year for shooter games. Like, I didn't think it would actually be this good until just kind of looking into it and just kind of realizing, oh, that came out in 2009. And well, the Game Awards did definitely get it mostly right. So let's start with Killzone 2. So this was Guerrilla Interactive's follow-up to the original Killzone, which back in the day not really received well due to its low frame rate, pretty generally uninspired gameplay, and well, not really standing out in comparison to like other shooters at the time. Well, Killzone was able to change a lot of those problems. Like, they were able to fix a lot of those issues. And yeah, this was the game that proved that Microsoft might actually have competition from Sony when it comes to the first-person shooter department. And while you can definitely say that like it's not as good as like the Halo franchise, I'll definitely stand by that Halo is still better. That doesn't necessarily discount that Killzone was a genuine, competitor to Halo. And well, this was definitely the perfect year to test that theory out, because Halo 3 ODST came out the same year. And I'd say this is definitely like the best direct comparison between both of those franchises, because Killzone 2 is a bit more, you're not really playing a super soldier, you're playing just a general soldier. No DST, you're playing more of a special forces that isn't particularly a super soldier like you do in the, original Halo trilogy or Reach. And yeah, I would definitely say that like, while I would still say that ODST is still a overall good experience, it's definitely the weakest like Bungie era Halo game. Like I would definitely say that. Mostly because like I don't know, this game just does have its problems. Like its campaign is just a bit on the shorter side. It's a bit more focused in just one area, and so that does kind of make the game feel a bit more samey than it should. And while the enemies are exactly the same as they were back in Halo 3 base, which that's kind of partially why I do kind of feel it's a little bit insulting to refer to this as Halo 3 ODST, because here's the thing. You can tell that people like that they wanted this to be a standalone expansion, but it's not. Like it's too like, because the way in which it plays, it again the way in which the enemies act, they're just like they were in Halo 3, but the way in which your character plays, because of the height difference and because of the way in which weapons were changed around, it does not play like Halo 3. It's like a weird mix. And I can say that truthfully because, again, I played this game last year. And while I definitely didn't have like a bad experience with it, I would definitely say that it has some issues that you're gonna have to get over, like, if you really want to get into this. Like, it's not like what I would say an entry level Halo game. That's for sure. Like, this should not be your first Halo game because it's not the best representation of Halo. And like I said, it's kind of the weakest entry in the franchise, or at least in the Bungie era. It's not the weakest entry in the franchise, that's for sure. But yeah. And then we've got Left 4 Dead 2. So I've played this game constantly for you guys. It should be pretty obvious that this is the one that I'm gonna say is, definitely one that I do agree with. I may not necessarily like playing this game all the time, because I feel like I played this game a lot in the late 2010s on both YouTube and on Twitch, and I just admittedly got burnt out on it. I still enjoy it. It's still a fun ride, through and through, but it's definitely a game that I would recommend you guys only play in short bursts rather than just constant plays. It's not something like, Payday or Deep Rock Galactic, where because there's, this amount of progression and because there's tons of different levels in Payday, and you have the randomly generated levels in Deep Rock. This game, unfortunately, in some ways has aged in that respect, but it's still a good game that I would recommend you guys check out. And yes, I did purposely ignore Modern Warfare 2, so there's a reason for that. And, well, it's a reason that I've explained for years now. It's not inherently a bad game, but I do think Modern Warfare 2 is overrated as fuck. This is not the best Call of Duty game. It's not even the best Modern Warfare game. Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 3, I do think are just better games. Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer was way better balanced. It had a better weapon roster, I would say. It had, I'd say it had like more variety of kill streaks, because with Modern Warfare 2, a lot of the kill streaks did kind of feel the same. And, well, let's be real here. Modern Warfare 2 just has the most annoying shit in the game to deal with. I've played this game on multiplayer on both console and PC, and both experiences were the actual worst, even on unmodded lobbies. I could not tell you how many times I've had to deal with one-man noob tube danger close builds, or people running with commando, or people quick scoping all the time with the intervention, or people abusing stopping power with every goddamn gun that they use, or using the UMP-45 silencer, like silenced, running around like a freaking nerd. Like, I'm sorry, but this game is not as, like, I hate doing this fucking meme, because, like, it's, Goldie and I joke about this shit all the time, like this phrase, but this is actually an unironic case in which I would have to say this game is not as good as you remember, multiplayer-wise and even campaign-wise. This campaign makes no goddamn sense, like, on just a fundamental basic logic. And considering that this is supposed to be a bit more of a grounded experience, it just kind of ruins the immersion. I've already made plenty of rants about it for years. Like, I've made this point since 2017, honestly. And yeah, I still stand by that Modern Warfare 2 is the most overrated Call of Duty, for sure. Is it the worst Call of Duty? No. but it's certainly the most overrated. That being said, though, even back in 2009, nerds definitely disagreed with me on this one, so it's like, yeah, I hate to do it, but this is Hoodie-itis again. Which I know that's gonna piss some people off, because people are gonna be like, "No, this is the best fucking game ever." You're like, you're just go back and play like freaking the F word game. I'm not gonna actually say the fucking name of the game that shall not be named, but you get the point. People are hella fucking toxic like whenever you say that, like, any game is better than this. People get fucking toxic as hell. I've seen it. Even on my YouTube channel, I've seen this bullshit happen where people just straight up just kind of try to shut down the conversation from people talking about, games that are better than Modern Warfare 2. Like, I'm sorry, but like, granted, admittedly, something similar to this happened yesterday, but whenever I was on the stream with Saimori. Yes, that's why I didn't stream yesterday. Go check out our collaboration stream yesterday. But it's like, here's the thing. You can like or dislike whatever game you want. But if you try to shut down the conversation, I don't have respect for you. Like, if you're just going to be shitting on people's opinion, or if you're just going to be blatantly shitting on like something just for the sake of shitting on something, because I have my reasons as to why I don't like Modern Warfare 2. I'm not shitting on it because I am trying to put this game in a bad faith argument. This game is just because again, this game's not bad. It is not as, unfortunately, it is just not that good in comparison to other Call of Duty games. So, if you still love the game, that is fine. Just don't tell me this is the greatest shooter game of all time. Otherwise, I will argue up a tree on you on that. So, and don't try to shut down the conversation either, because that's when I get pissed. So, but yeah, as far as like I'm concerned, yeah, no, this is just a case of, at least for this channel, this is a case of Hoodie-itis, and it's just, yeah. But what would I actually have chosen instead? Well, Killzone, Halo 3, Killzone 2, Halo ODST, and Left 4 Dead 2, they're staying on here. I'm also going to nominate Uncharted 2, because I feel like that's kind of the better category for this. But I'm also going to nominate Arma 2 and Red Faction Guerrilla. So Arma 2, tactical shooter, the sequel to, Arma from 2006. A much improved version of that original game, if I say so myself. Because with the first Arma game, like, it still honestly really felt like Bohemian Interactive's previous game from that, which was the first Operation Flashpoint, which... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Like, it really did feel very similar, and because of that, I wouldn't necessarily say that, like, Arma 1 is, like, the best game to go back to, even for a tactical shooter. But with Arma 2, it is way, way, way more streamlined, at least in comparison. There's still a lot of, like, button cues that you need to remember. Like, there's still a lot of, like, just that sort of, hardcore milsim tacticalness to Arma that, like, you need to, like, get into. But it is definitely a game that I would say is much more polished and an overall better game to get into in comparison, especially as far as, like, this specific style of shooter is concerned. Like, if you want, like, a really immersive, tactical shooter, Arma 2 is definitely not a bad choice. Obviously, there is Arma 3, but if you want a more, older style of game, like, you want something that's, like, is noticeably old, but is, more streamlined, I would definitely check out Arma 2. And then we get into Red Faction Guerrilla. So, finally, I get an excuse to talk about this game because, well, Red Faction Guerrilla honestly is one of the most fun games that I've played that I've not talked about. This game is so much fun. I've actually, funny enough, I've talked about the original Red Faction more than I talked about Guerrilla, which is really funny. But yeah, no, Red Faction Guerrilla, they changed up the genre because the original game was a shooter, like a first-person shooter. They changed it into a third-person shooter, open world as well. And yeah, no, this game basically just lets you go, like it lets you just go ham on all the objectives that you need to do, especially with the amount of destructible environments that are in this game, and just the overall making it kind of like a mix between like the GTA style of games, and what's it, like honestly, like I guess something like that, or like even in like I don't want to say Ghost Recon. I guess this game controls similar to like the Advanced Warfighter Ghost Recon games at least. So I guess you can say this is proto Ghost Recon Wildlands. Not really. It plays nothing like Wildlands, but you know what I mean. It's much more open-ended as far as its mission structure is, and that honestly can lead to some pretty fun, engaging missions, and like just missions and gameplay overall. And it also helps that, like, while yes, this game does take place on Mars, it isn't just a red desert planet, like open world. There's other parts that you can go to that are a bit more industrialized, with like a brownish tint, or like more of a residential, which is a bit more greenish tinted. It adds to just the overall look of an otherwise could have just been something else planet. Hell, I'm pretty sure there's even like a snowy area in the game, which is pretty insane. So yeah, like, and again, just that interactability and that open-endedness to finishing the mission however you please really does make this honestly one of the most memorable games from this year, and was a pretty big comeback from a series that didn't have a sequel in 7 years. So as far as I'm concerned, this game definitely needs to get a little bit more recognition, because this game's pretty awesome. But enough gushing. Let's get into the winner, which might surprise you guys. So, alright, so here we go. Alright, so let's do this. So the award to the best shooter game of 2009 goes to Red Faction Guerrilla. Yeah, you guys are probably shocked, because you guys were probably thinking it was going to be Uncharted, which I will definitely say it's pretty close. But as far as like just pure shooters are concerned, I'm going to give the nod to Guerrilla. Again, this was a return to form to the series, because there wasn't a new game in the Red Faction series in 7 years. Because the first game came out in 2001, the second game came out a year later, and they didn't really do anything after that until Guerrilla. This game showed a lot of promise, and was even able to kind of achieve a lot of the potential that the series had. Obviously, in a more third-person perspective this time around, but still pretty good nonetheless. Again, those destructible environments, like, usually that would be seen as like a gimmick, but that's like the whole game. Like, the whole game is centered around being able to use the environment to your advantage, and being able to do it through the mission design that is in the game itself. And it also helps that, like, the shooting mechanics and just the overall stuff that you can do is pretty fun in its own right. Like, again, this game is, I would definitely say that, like, it is also kind of bleeds into the action adventure genre, especially since, like, you do have a melee option with that freaking hammer. I'd like to compare this to something like the Just Cause games, where Just Cause, like, those games are a mix between open world, third person shooting, and action adventure. They kind of bleed in. This is kind of another example of a game that's like that. But if I'm gonna nominate one game, I'm gonna nominate this, because this game still has really fun shooting mechanics. And again, this game has open-ended loose progression. So you can pretty much tackle not only, like, whatever objective you want. Hell, you can even go to, like, other parts of the map and just kind of, do the objectives there, and then just kind of finish wherever you want. Similar to Ghost Recon Wildlands. I know I compared this game to Ghost Recon again, but, like, you get the point. Like, I'd say that's a pretty cool way in which they add that, that sort of freedom of play. And like I said, the game, I will admit, for most of the game, like, the areas that you go into, it is basic, like, most of them is more so just salad dressing, but they are varied just enough to have you keep going. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, like, if you want a pretty fun, revolutionary open world shooter game, yeah, no, Red Faction Guerrilla has you covered. Like, it, especially considering that, like, Far Cry is first person, Just Cause is third person, but it's a bit more, loose. This one definitely takes that that style and puts it into space. Therefore, I would definitely recommend you guys check it out. Alright, sim and strategy. Now, this was a year that was really kind to this particular genre. Because admittedly, with 2010 and 2011, I was starting to get a bit concerned. Because, like, there really wasn't much for me to, like, cover from those years as far as this particular category. But suffice to say, But suffice to say, 2009 was probably one of the best years for the sim strategy genre. Like, there were so many, like, games from both, subcategories that, honestly, this was, like, it definitely showed that, like, yeah, even in the late 2000s, this genre was able to thrive as much as it did. And in 2009, we got some of the biggest hits ever, as far as I'm concerned. So let's start off with admittedly one I'd say is probably, like, the weakest in this entire lineup right here. 40K Dawn of War 2. So obviously, Dawn of War 2 is the successor to the first game. And I had a lot of fun with the first game. Dare I say, it's one of the best RTS games ever made. Hands down. I think it's that good. But I will also admit that, like, it's not for everyone. And, well, Relic Entertainment realized that. And so with the sequel, they changed the formula around a bit. They changed it into more of a stationary RTS where you already pretty much have everything. You just need to go after the nodes and just upgrade your individual buildings from there. You don't need to, like, build a ton of other buildings and, like, do everything. You can just kind of have it all centralized in one location. I will admit that has some benefits and it has some drawbacks. The benefit is that you don't have to, like, clutter the entire map with, as many, like, buildings. You can just pretty much, build, all your units from, like, one point, and you just need to worry about, like, capturing other points. That's fair, but it comes at the cost of you being able to, push out as many troops as you can. And it does slow down the gameplay significantly. And I will admit that I wasn't particularly the greatest fan of a lot of those changes. So, it's still a good game, but I am hesitant to say that this is a top tier RTS, especially considering that this game was a lot more hero based. Yes, you heard me right. This was kind of the beginning of whenever they started treating this more as a MOBA. And well, considering that this was 2009 and League of Legends came out that same year, this was sort of the beginning of that genre also becoming a bit of a thing. So, it's technically a MOBA. At least I consider it to be a MOBA, because, again, this game is very hero-centric, at least in comparison to the previous game. So, and while that's not necessarily, the worst thing in the world, I just prefer to be able to play with, massive armies. Which, of course, leads us into Halo Wars. So, this was another spin-off in the Halo series, except this time outsourced to Ensemble, who worked on this. And yeah, no, this okay, it's funny that I'm going to be talking about this game because, well, this was actually the very first RTS I've ever played. Yes, one of the last, RTS games was actually my first. And I will definitely say I had a lot of fun with Halo Wars. I can recognize that why some people are pretty hesitant with it, especially with its very lackluster story. Trust me, don't play RTS games for their story, I swear to God. But as far as gameplay is concerned, oh yeah, no, this is fun as hell. It is a bit more basic. You aren't able to place your buildings exactly where you want. You have designated spots. But I do think it works in the benefit of this game. And it also, gets rid of the problem I have with Dawn of War 1, or Dawn of War 2, where you can still, pretty much produce troops however you want. And yeah, no, I have a lot of admittedly biased memories with this game. But I still think that this game is pretty fun to play. Even if admittedly it is only just UNSC versus Covenant. If they would have added the Flood as an official, third faction, or maybe even a Forerunner fourth, that would have been cool. Or even adding in the Rebels. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, Halo Wars is a pretty solid RTS. And well, it was my first RTS, and I thought it worked pretty well. So if you want a good beginner RTS game, Halo Wars 1, got you covered. Though I will warn you, the PC version has some weird controls even for an RTS, and I don't think you can you can remap them. So, because this game first came out on the 360. So, yeah. But yeah, next up, speaking of spin-offs, although technically, I guess this is kind of just more of a sub-series, Tom Clancy's Hawks. So, this one I respect, because, I don't really play a lot of flight sim games. Oh my god. Sorry, my throat's hurting, and also I'm getting tired, I don't know. But yeah, I don't really play too many flight simulation games. But when I do, I have a lot of fun with them. And well, let's just say that Hawks is definitely one of them. I find it to be it's definitely that good middle ground between extremely realistic and arcadey enough to where you can still enjoy it. It's that perfect mix of both styles. In which, because of that, I could still recommend this as a good sort of kind of middle ground, because it's a bit more on, it's a bit more complicated than like something like your Ace Combat games, but it's not like super advanced like the IL-2 Sturmovik games, um, or even like the very old school X-Wing and TIE Fighter games from back in the 90s. Like, it's a good, streamlined enough flight sim game that, like, I could recommend this to pretty much anyone. And you can still have a lot of fun. So, if you want, like, something, especially something that's kind of in, like, a more military, you know, like, game lane, I'd recommend you guys check out the Hawks 1. Some people have issues with Hawks 2. I like Hawks 2. There's some pretty cool moments, but I know some people are kind of iffy with that game, so because of that, yeah. But then if like, you aren't really into that and you want something that's a bit more, just casual, The Sims 3's got you covered. So, yeah, we finally get to talk about The Sims 3 proper. And I think I've mentioned this before, but admittedly, The Sims 3 is kind of a guilty pleasure franchise for me. Or at least like Sims 2, 3, and even a little bit of 4. Like, a lot of the games I play are very action-oriented, shooters, just action-adventure games, strategy, like, fighting games. Like, a lot of just, basically just war and combat related games. That being said, though, I have a very sweet spot. Like, I have like a soft spot for games like The Sims. And I do think that, like, as far as like the Sims series is concerned, The Sims 3 is definitely a well-warranted evolution of like The Sims as a whole. Like, as far as, bringing it to the open world and adding in much even better customization than what Sims 2 offered in comparison to Sims 1, it actually makes this game way more enjoyable to play, compared to a lot of other games that, came out around that time under, that tried doing a similar thing. And so, yeah, like, The Sims 3, I would recommend to you guys. And, well, again, this is another game, along with The Sims 2, to be fair, that I remember so many ads for back in the day. Like, oh my god. I don't know. Again, admittedly, like, the mid to late 2000s, I will admit, I don't usually get nostalgic, but I'm kind of nostalgic for that era, because again, that was my childhood. Just that sort of era in general. And I just just vividly remember just so many of these ads on, like, TV. But, bias aside, I would definitely say that, like, The Sims 3 is a very, very solid continuation to the Sims 2 formula, and I must recommend you guys check it out for yourselves. But of course, if that's not your jam, then check out these other city builders over here. So, Anno 1404 and Tropico 3, both of which are city builders in their own right. 1404 being set in, like, the, I guess, like, the Renaissance era? Or at least, kind of the age of exploration, sort of, is what this game is themed around. And as you can see, it mostly, it's tied into, like, Middle East. But yeah, no, this is definitely like the first Anno game that I actually feel more comfortable recommending to you guys, since well, the game's sort of in between, this and 1800 are not particularly received well. This is the one that I know for a fact people would still recommend. And, well, truth be told, this is probably the best Anno game. So if you want to get into the series, this is your best choice, especially if you like more historic-based city builders. Can't get any better than this. Or can you? because Tropico 3 also came out in 2009. Another long-awaited sequel, 6 years in the making, since the second game came out in 2003. This came out in 2009. And yeah, no, this game, really, really damn fun. I am not gonna lie. I would recommend you guys check out Tropico 3 if you want, especially since this was the first 3D Tropico game, because the first two were isometric city builders, similar in line to the old SimCity games. This was, the first 3D one, and yeah, no, like this game, especially if you want to build your like Cold War-esque Caribbean style of like dictatorial island. You can still be a democracy in the game. It just kind of depends on how you play. Then yeah, no, Tropico 3 is a very, really, really fun, enjoyable experience that I would say is a great competitor to Anno, at least for 2009 comparisons. So yeah, no, very solid year for Sim strategy games. Again, I wouldn't necessarily say that like all of these are like iconic or like iconic games, but like in their respective lanes, they're very respected. Like of course Dawn of War and Halo Wars for the RTS crowd, Tropico and Anno for the city building crowd, and then Sims 3 for the life sim crowd, and then Hawks for the flight sim crowd. That's a really good variety of games right there. That being said, there can only be one winner, as always. But I think this is definitely going to be a worthwhile winner. So, the award to the best strategy/simulation game of 2009 goes to The Sims 3. Yeah, The Sims 3 wins. And for good reason. This game is a much, much, much more better fleshed out and realized version of Will Wright's original version. This was actually the last game, at least that we can confirm, that had Will Wright work on it. Because, well, he would leave in 2008 after the release of another Maxis game that we may or may not talk about next weekend. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this was sort of like the last, touch of grace that Maxis as a company would have. Because, well, everything after this wouldn't particularly be the greatest. The expansion packs for The Sims 3, for the most part, I would say were pretty good. Even if there were some stuff packs that were pretty much duds. But yeah, like everything that they would work on afterwards, like Darkspore, SimCity 2013, and especially The Sims 4 in a lot of people's eyes, yeah, it just feels very inferior to what they worked on back in the 90s and 2000s. And yeah, like I would say there's just a lot of, I guess, issues that they would have. That being said, though, that's not to discredit The Sims 3 at all. It is still a worthwhile game that I would recommend you guys check out. Even just the base game. Because obviously this game has a much better sim customization compared to The Sims 1 and 2. This was the open world Sims game, because they got rid of it with The Sims 4. But with Sims 3, they decided, hey, what's the point of having open world? Like, what's the point of having loading screens? Let's let the player go wild. And yeah, no, that was definitely a cool enough experiment that I think paid off. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but as far as I'm concerned, I think it's pretty cool. There's also just a lot of more quality of life improvements that they made with this game, specifically involving the camera and the way in which you kind of like control around the camera. It's way more, user friendly as opposed to like the weird way in which it worked in the first two games. And you know what? I'm just gonna say right now, like, granted, Goldie's definitely gonna agree with me on this, but in my opinion, this is probably the best Sims game. You can argue whether this or Sims 2 are better, which of course I have some Sims 2 related stuff on the shelf, so that's not to discredit the Sims 2. I'm just saying that, like, as far as, like, being one of the, like, the best ways to get into the Sims, I would say that Sims 3 is definitely your best bet. And it also helps that, like, thankfully they still have all of the DLC and expansion packs still on the Steam webpage. Like, they still have them all on Steam. And as far as I'm concerned, the item store, for better and, well, mostly for worse, as because it's still locked content, but that's still up as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, and of course, bonus, this game has tons of mod support. Granted, not directly through Steam, but through ModDB and other websites like it. So yeah, Sims 3, I approve. Like, okay, I will say this. If, granted, this is more so just, fantasizing at this point, but imagine if we had, like, a Sims game with the house building and the character building of The Sims 4, but with the gameplay of The Sims 3. And the expansion packs came with as much stuff as the stuff that you see in Sims 2 and 3 expansion packs. I think people would have a lot higher of an opinion of Maxis if they ever did that. But I think part of the problem is that, well, EA basically is using Maxis as a, puppet with their corpse. And so because of that, we're probably never going to really see, like, a quality Sims title, at least anytime soon. I mean, they're still milking The Sims 4 almost 10 years later. Just give it up, Maxis, already. Stop trying to, like, add more content to that game. Move on to your next project. You can only do so much to a game. Just let the modders add shit to that game if you want to have more support for it. A game should never cost over $1,000 to get everything in the game. Fuck that. I know The Sims 3 has a lot of DLC, but at least they stopped. So, yeah, no. Alright. Let's get away from the dreariness about that, and let's get into the sports racing fighting games. So, again, another year. We've been seeing a lot of years have this category, like, pop up as of late. And that's good, because, again, I've been getting more into racing and fighting games as a whole. But, suffice to say, we've got ourselves a few sports titles here as well. So, I was able to get just enough for this category, because, again, I'm a bit more reserved when it comes to sports games. And, well, yeah, fighting games I'm still kind of iffy with. But racing games, I'm open for. Which is why, of course, we've got Need for Speed Shift and Forza Motorsports 3 here. Need for Speed Shift definitely being more on just the general racing side as far as Need for Speed games are concerned. It's much more, yeah, like I said, it's definitely more of a traditional racing game. Which is not a bad thing. Like, I would definitely say that, like, if that's more your jam, that's completely fine. And I'd say it did a pretty okay job with it. So, not my, direct favorite, way in which, that's going on, but I would still say that, like, if you want, like, sort of, a traditional, more controlled racing game, Need for Speed Shift could, be a good option for you guys. And of course, that then leads us into Forza Motorsport 3. So, funny enough, this was actually the second racing game I've ever played. Well, if you don't, okay, lie. third. Because if we're counting like, kart racing games, then yeah, this would be my like third. But if we're talking about traditional racing games, this would be like my second. Yeah, because like I remember whenever we got the 360, we got that with a bundle, funny enough, with Halo ODST and Forza Motorsport 3. Because yeah, we got one of the black models. So, but yeah, no, like Forza 3, I will admit I am a little bit biased with this game, but I actually I will admit I kind of have some fun with it. I will definitely say it is a much better Forza game than the first two Forza Motorsports. Because admittedly, those two are kind of janky, and they're very clunky, at least in comparison to what Gran Turismo was doing at the time. Like they just weren't really great competitors to what Sony was doing. But then Motorsport 3 came out, and yeah, no, it was definitely a much needed improvement compared to the first two. And yeah, that jump to the 360 was worth all of its penny. Like, it was worth every penny. So if you want like a really good outdoor driving simulator, I don't want to say simulator, that's kind of weird called racing games, but if you want like more outdoor racing style of games, for Forza Motorsport 3 's got you covered. And then we've got as far as sports games are concerned, we've got Skate 2. So this was the follow-up to Skate 1. And yeah, as far as movement, as far as the way in which you control your character, the way in which you perform tricks, yeah, Skate 2, I would definitely say is a pretty respectable follow-up. And a pretty solid way in which you could get into the skate games. So, granted, you're probably going to have to find a console version of these games because they're not on PC. And I don't necessarily know how cheap these games are because they're a bit more obscure in comparison to your Tony Hawks. But 2 is still a respectable choice that, like, if you want a bit of a more, physics-based skateboarding game, it's definitely a good call. And then last but not least, we've got Wii Sports Resort, which, funny enough, I did not grow up with this whenever we had our Wii. We had Wii Sports Classic, obviously, but Wii Sports Resort was just not really a game that, like, we got, like, despite the fact that, like, my relatives, like, they loved playing Wii Sports. Like, that was their jam. We just never picked this one up. I remember seeing all the commercials for this back in the day. I know that's a common thing for tonight. I apologize, but I'm being serious. But like I remember like seeing this everywhere, but we didn't really pick it up until, well, last month, where I finally decided to pick it up for myself. 15 years later. So, and I will admit, I've been experimenting with this game. And yeah, no, this game is still pretty fun. It offers a lot of the same stuff that was in the first Wii Sports. Like, as far as just kind of, being, just using the motion controls of the Wii to kind of, play it, like, everything in the game. But I would definitely say that, like, it's definitely a much more, realized vision. And while I will say I'm not the biggest fan of, having a franchise dedicated around a console, like, that is just kind of one thing that I don't really like about this, the Wii line of games. Wii Sports, Wii Play, Wii Party, Wii Music. I don't know, it just kind of feels like you're just kind of, self-indulging in your success a little bit. I'd be hard-pressed to say that, like, this was, terrible. Because it's not terrible. It's pretty fun in its own right. And yeah, admittedly, kind of a guilty pleasure, but there's a reason why this was pretty successful and why they eventually, would make Switch Sports. So, and I think they even did a Wii U Sports, but it is what it is. But of course, let's get into the winner, which this one was admittedly pretty close because, a lot of these games, again, and this is coming from someone who doesn't really give a shit about like sports and like racing games as much as like other genres. This was a pretty close one. Most of these I would consider to be pretty quality like titles in their respective franchises. But of course, you guys know the drill. So, the winner, or the award for the best sports racing fighting game of 2009 goes to Forza Motorsport 3. Yeah, this one's probably the most biased pick because yes, this was the first Forza game that I did play, and this was one of the earlier racing games I ever played. But even just kind of putting that aside, it is obvious as to why this is regarded as being one of the best Forza games, if not the best Forza Motorsport game in a lot of people's eyes. When you compare this to the first two games, yeah, no, this game basically improved itself when it comes to its driving and physics mechanics. Like, it's a much more smooth game to kind of play, as opposed to just kind of the jankiness of the first two. It's also still a beautiful looking game to look at, even today. Like, I mean, you can probably tell by, like, the car models, like, that it is from the late 2000s, but, like, the landscapes, especially in the outdoor environments, it is so beautiful. Like, oh my god, it's insane. And it also helps with the career modes that are in this game, as well as, the amount of, tracks that you can go on, most of which are sprawling outdoor, woodsy environments that do complement the gameplay. And the car selection is so vast, it's insane. And well, like I said, this is a biased pick, but even hardcore racing game fans would agree that this does deserve to be given the nod. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, Forza 3, solid choice as far as getting you guys into racing games. It worked for me, so take that for what it's worth. All right, multiplayer. So obviously this is the part of the video where we're gonna start seeing repeats of everything. So I'm gonna make sure that we go through these a bit fast. But yeah, multiplayer games. It honestly shouldn't surprise you what games they're gonna have on here, because the last two categories obviously weren't in the original Spiky Video Game Awards because they don't give a shit about simulation games. And while they do love sports games, I don't particularly care for most sports games. And they're willing to, give out Madden the win every fucking year. But as far as multiplayer games, most of them should be pretty obvious as to which ones are going to be nominated. But there is one weird choice that they decided to throw out, which only makes sense in context, and I don't think the Game Awards themselves even realized why they chose it. You see the problem. You probably see the problem already. So let's start off with the games that are pretty obvious. Modern Warfare 2. Again, I've already ranted about that game a million times. This is why I don't like its multiplayer, and I like the other Call of Duty games multiplayers from around this time period in comparison. But I'm not going to repeat myself. But it makes sense, because again, this game did very well. Left 4 Dead 2 also did very well, and well, obviously a bit more co-op based. but still pretty fun regardless. So makes sense. Like that's totally fine. Borderlands even having its sort of ability to play the entire game cooperatively. As a matter of fact, I think Saimori has been doing a whole series on Borderlands, or at least he's been playing Borderlands with other people, and that's pretty cool for him. So yeah, like that makes sense. Like I'd say those three definitely make the most sense. Halo ODST. Okay, to be fair, it has firefights. There's only one problem though. I don't think they nominated this for firefight. I think they nominated this for the Halo 3 Mythic multiplayer that came bundled with Halo 3 ODST. AKA Halo 3 multiplayer, but without the Halo 3 campaign. So, yeah, I like Firefight. To be fair, Firefight is fun. I like Firefight. It's just better in Reach, though. Although, to be fair, the drones are actually in this version of Firefight, and they're not in Firefight for Reach. Or at least I don't think they are. It's weird. It's stupid. Who cares? But no, I don't know. This is not a very good selection of games. If you were to ask me, I'd choose Left 4 Dead 2. That being said, it should be pretty obvious that they chose Modern Warfare 2 instead, which isn't hoodie-itis in this case, but again, I'm telling you guys, it's really not as good as you remember. You're just only remembering the good moments about, you're only remembering the good matches from Modern Warfare 2. So, that being said though, Spec Ops is fun as hell in Modern Warfare 2. That's actually the most underrated part about that game. Which is the saddest part because that's the least popular. But it's like, dude, Spec Ops is like the best part of Modern Warfare 2. That I will give credit to the game. So, I just wish people actually cared about it. But what did I end up choosing anyways? Well, mostly games that we haven't that we have talked about, excuse me. Halo Wars, of course. RTS fun. Definitely recommend it. Arma 2, milsim tactical experience, much improved over the first Arma. Makes sense. Forza 3 even, I'm going to say, I had a lot of fun back in the day with Forza 3 with couch co-op, or excuse me, couch split screen multiplayer, just kind of racing against my cousins in this game. It was a lot of fun. So, and I'd even imagine that trying to play this game online was pretty fun as well. We didn't have Xbox Live Gold, so we couldn't play online. But yeah, no, Forza was pretty fun. And of course, Left 4 Dead 2 should be pretty obvious. But I'm also going to give a nod to Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising. Wait. You said that, Bohemian Interactive, they were working on Arma, and they originally worked on the first Operation Flashpoint. Yes, they did. But only the first game. This game, Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising, was made by Codemasters. So history lesson. So back in 2001, Bohemia Interactive was signed under a contract with Codemasters to make Operation Flashpoint Cold War Rising, which was an alternate history tactical shooter. And that did pretty well. Unfortunately, there were a lot of, licensing contracting issues between Bohemia and Codemasters. And so eventually by I think around 2000 4 or 5, Bohemia was completely cut any sort of ties with Codemasters. And well, by 2006, obviously Bohemia would work on Arma 1, and that mild success basically made Codemasters a little bit jealous, and they okay, even though that like Bohemia worked on the original Operation Flashpoint, Codemasters still had the rights to the name of Operation Flashpoint. And so, well, as history repeats itself, competition came out, and these games were basically like competing with each other. So, yeah, Arma 2 obviously, being more, I guess, I don't want to say indie, because it's not an indie game, it's a AA game. Well, they're both AA games. But yeah, like as far as like, smaller, lesser known, quasi open world tactical shooters are concerned, they were basically competing with each other back in like 2009. And I will say, Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising, I actually think, as far as like, a game, it's actually much easier to get into because it's way more streamlined as a tactical shooter, but it is still noticeably a tactical shooter. You will still die pretty quickly, but it honestly feels, funny enough, more in line with like, in which like the newer Rainbow Six games at the time were like, or even Battlefield or Call of Duty, like as far as like control wise, which made it a lot easier to get into. Unfortunately, well, I don't think you can buy the game on Steam anymore, which that's a little bit lame, because this game, I would say, if you're able to get like a copy of this, I would say it's not too bad of an option. It's still on. It's just, Red River that's no longer on for whatever weird reason. But yeah, I would say like it's a good enough game that like I would recommend, especially as like a cooperative experience. So that's at least my take on Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising, is that like it's not the most perfect game out there. And well, unfortunately, yeah, I'm looking at the reviews. There's some issues with like, the fact that this was on Xbox, like this was on, Windows, like Windows for Live, and there's some weird stuff. But go look up the PC Gaming Wiki to fix that shit. I can't fix that for you guys immediately here. But yeah, you get the point. It's a game that I do respect. And again, even if it was made a little bit out of spite, I'd rather there be competition in the tactical shooter market, which, I mean, nowadays there's plenty of options out there. But this was sort of like, the beginning of that breakout for tactical shooters. Because eventually we would, get stuff like Hell Let Loose and Squad and stuff like that. Of course, though, let's see who wins. So the award for the best multiplayer game goes to, from 2009, goes to, unsurprisingly, Left 4 Dead 2. It's obvious as to why this is winning. If you guys have seen my channel, or even any of the stuff that I've done on YouTube, it's obvious as to why this is the winner. I played this game all the frickin' time, for better and for worse for my personal sanity, but I haven't been playing it as often as of late, so because of that, I can stomach it, and it's still a really fun cooperative experience even to this day. Of course, it added in more weapons, more melee options, more enemy variety compared to the first game. Admittedly, it does have better characters, and, well, the locales are pretty memorable, especially, considering that, like, you're in the South for pretty much all the campaign settings. You go through, a mall, you go through a, pretty much like a flooded, community. you go through a swamp, you go through a theme park or amusement park, whatever. Like, there's a lot of, oh, you even go through like the French Quarter in New Orleans. Like, it's pretty like vast as far as locales, and thankfully it makes it to where like each campaign can still feel unique even if the gameplay can feel a bit monotonous at points. And well, as a bit of a bonus, as always, this game does have mod support, though it's not the type of mod support that I wish, because it doesn't really, like, at least on the Steam Workshop, most of the weapons just are more so like skins as opposed to new weapons. Same thing with like the character models for both, the players and the enemies. And so, though there are new custom maps, which that's pretty cool. I just wish that there were more better options for that thing, at least personally. Oh, anyways, sorry. Let's get on to the DLCs. So this was another category, of course, of the Game Awards. Unfortunately, though, this was a pretty Fantano, can you take it away from me, please?
It's not good.
This was a pretty painful one, at least for me. Because well, you're about to see why. I shit you not. They literally chose 2 expansions from GTA 4 and 2 expansions from Fallout 3. Oh my god. Okay. Even if you like GTA 4, and even if you like Fallout 3, this is really fucking stupid. Why? Okay, why? Why is it that, like, they you couldn't have chosen like another game to represent, like, at least like one more? Because like there were a lot of DLC. There was quite a bit of DLC that came out this year, and they decided to choose Fallout 3 DLC twice and GTA DLC twice. Oh my god. Granted, that being said, I can't comment on any of these. Because, well, I just played GTA 4 for the first time, like, not that long ago. And I haven't even reached any of the content from either of those packs, so I can't tell you anything about that. And I can't tell you anything about Fallout 3's DLC because I don't give a shit about Fallout 3. I don't like Fallout as a franchise. I only gave credit a little bit to New Vegas, but that's it. So, that being said, though, at least from what I heard, the better of the, like, the better expansion from GTA 4 was the Ballad of Gay Tony. And well, it shouldn't surprise at least the GTA fan base that the Ballad of Gay Tony was the one that won. So if that makes you happy, that's fine. I just can't endorse this personally. And even if I did end up having this as like a nominee, I certainly am not going to add in the Lost and the Damned either. Again, one game only. Like, one DLC only. No, yeah, none of this. I should probably add that as a rule. But anyways, these are much more close to home expansions that make way more sense as far as the context of this channel, and even just expansions that I think are pretty cool. Command and Conquer 3 Red Alerts, or Command and Conquer Red Alert 3's Uprising expansion. And I guess we'll also talk about Company Heroes Tale of Valor. So these are both RTS games that came out in 2008 and 6 respectively. Red Alert 3 came out in 08. Company Heroes came out in 2006. Both franchises, RTS franchises that I do respect. And yeah, as far as expanding upon the core gameplay of both those respective games, these add a lot of value to them. Red Alert 3, of course, added a full new campaign mode that kind of continued off of the NATO versus Russia versus Japan scenario that was in that game. And yeah, as you can see, there's the Japanese schoolgirl character that they put at the front center of this, which is interesting. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, these are that's definitely a pretty good expansion for an already pretty good overall RTS game that I would definitely highly recommend to you guys. Same thing with Tales of Valor, which I think this was the last expansion for Company Heroes, if I'm not mistaken. So, which I mean, good thing that they ended up on a pretty good high note. This one just added in a few more units and added in some more maps. So it's not necessarily the biggest deal, but it's still an expansion that I would recommend to you guys. We'll ignore the middle one for now. Let's move over to World at War with the third map pack. So this is the DLC that came with, well, my personal favorite zombies map of all time, Durice. So that's a pretty big deal in its own right, because, well, yeah, Durice is definitely the map that at least made zombies how it is now in Call of Duty. Without Durice, without a lot of the features that were in Durice, would zombies even really be the same? I'd argue no, because that was the one that added in the Pack-a-Punch, added in the Monkey Bombs, added in the Bowie Knife. It added in a lot more lore depth, and just kind of helped I don't want to say fleshed out entirely, but it at least gave a bit more identity to the Ultimus crew. And, well, like I said, it's a fun as hell map. I recommend you guys check it out. You can get it on free, you can get it for free on PC, and since it's a Steam summer sale right now, I highly recommend you guys check it out right now before this sale ends. So go check it out. And then we've got the Force Unleashed Ultimate Sith Edition, or basically just kind of, I guess, collectively the DLC that came with the Force Unleashed. So this game, I know people have some issues with the Force Unleashed. I still find it to be a pretty cool hack and slash game for its time. And what the expansion pretty much added were 3 story campaigns, 2 of which were, alternate Star Wars timeline scenarios that I'm not going to spoil for just kind of the sake of this. And then one in which you go into the Jedi Temple and, do a bunch of trials. Basically doing what the PS2/Wii versions of the game did, but being able to play them on PS3, Xbox 360, PC. So, and yeah, no, I'd say, those, pretty much helped, continue on the story with, Galen Merrick, as he's named, or Star Killer, or whatever you want to call him. And just, it's just it's more small story bits, but pretty much just adds in a lot of cool stuff. And yeah, I would definitely recommend you guys check out, if you like Force Unleashed, but you didn't play, this version, the Ultimate Sith Edition, it does come with the base PC version on Steam now. So again, it's most likely on sale. I recommend you guys check it out. And then there's this fucking game. Okay, so yes, this channel did play Wizard 101. That was one of my first major series, but unfortunately, because I forgot to save certain VODs, I flipped my shit and I just basically gave up trying to, continue this game. Which is a damn shame because this was the game that got me into PC gaming in the first place. And I do respect Wizard 101 for not only introducing me to, just general fantasy games, as well as just the concept of both MMOs and RPGs, but also PC gaming as a whole. And I will say this. The Grizzleheim expansion, which essentially added a new world, a side world, this world was pretty damn fun. Like, you basically got, like, another, another, 7-8 hours worth of your time in probably the coolest world, or one of the coolest worlds in the game. With, like, pretty unique dungeons and boss fights, a lot of, challenging stuff that was released with this update. Like, this was a really cool update as far as, like, Wizard 101 is concerned. And yes, while you may make fun of Wizard 101 nowadays for just kind of being, not really talked about anymore, and people just remembering all the commercial. Again, this was another commercial game back in the late 2000s. I get it. And early 2010s a little bit. I get it. Grizzleheim showed that they can make an entire world that was completely optional, that, added a lot of depth to the Wizard 101 universe. And yeah, no, I would definitely recommend you guys eventually check it out if you have the patience to get all the way up there, because you have to be like level 20 in the game in order to, like, minimum to get to Grizzleheim. But Grizzleheim is also has certain areas that are meant for specific levels, which is a pretty cool way in which they, handled it while you do the main story. But of course, let's get into the winner. It will surprise you guys, but as of right now, I think I stand by it. So the award for the best DLC/expansion of 2009 goes to okay, I'm kind of hesitant saying this because I know some people are going to be weirded out by it, but I don't care. Wizard 101 Grizzleheim. So, yeah. Again, I don't really play Wizard 101 as much anymore. I've kind of moved on to bigger and, grander things. But let it be known that this is definitely a game that still had its moments. And, well, Grizzleheim was definitely one of them. Again, this, of course, expanded a lot of the lore of just kind of the universe in general. But because of its Viking aesthetic, it made it really stand out. It really did make it stand out back in the day. And I would argue that, as far as worlds in the game are concerned, this is definitely in a lot of people's top worlds. And honestly, in hindsight, one of the better updates to this game, as far as I'm concerned. And it helps that each area in this world is pretty unique, because you've got a bit of a foresty area, where there's a bunch of spiders and grendels, basically goblin-like creatures. And then there's also one where it's just a ravaged Viking colony. There's an entire village that's built on the side of a cliff. There's an entire cave with banshees and wolves running around. Hell, there's even dungeons there's a dungeon that's basically a giant maze that's also tied in with another dungeon where it has different biomes in each room, in which it leads into a final boss in the middle of like those two dungeons, where it's one of the most challenging fights in the game. And don't even get me started on the coven that you fight in the game. So as far as like, you know, MMORPGs expansions are concerned, this one is it lit again. This is a bit more biased because again, this was a game that I grew up with, and this was a game that I have a lot of, you know, memories with, and also way too much money sunk into this game. That like I feel like I am obligated to at least give this game at least some sort of a win. And like I said, this game, you don't just complete this, you know, world, you know, through and through. It's each area is pretty much like level locked, so that you aren't, you know, doing the whole thing. Like it's more so tied into the progression of your wizard in the entire game. And well, the most interesting thing is that this isn't even required. This is like completely optional. If you don't want to do Grizzleheim, you can just completely avoid it. That being said, though, everyone still recommends you go into it because there's so much good loot in there. Or, well, that's changed, you know, since then, because obviously there's the Zeus boss fight for his wand for level 35s, and then there's the waterworks for level 60s, and then of course there's the you know, yeah, it's like, so yeah, there's like some stuff that like might be better, but it's still to kind of check out, even if you just want to get XP in the game. So, and you just want to fight a bunch of like grizzly bears and, you know, ravens. I'm not gonna say wolves for a specific, you know, character. Don't worry, Roxy. I'm not gonna hurt any of your kin for tonight. Don't worry. Don't give me that look. Let's move on. Alright. Art direction. So, again, not a category for the Game Awards, but it's a category from the newer Game Awards that I decided to kind of, you know, apply, because I think it's a pretty important one to bring up. So, as far as I'm concerned, these are pretty much the best games that I could represent for this year, all of which have their own unique, distinct, you know, identity as far as, you know, their looks. Sims 3, of course, with that sort of retro modern look. I don't know how to describe it. It's definitely inspired by like a bunch of different eras, but it kind of feels unique. And of course, because of its more, you know, CG looking aesthetics, it definitely makes it stand out. So I gotta give credit where credit is due. Trine, of course, with its high fantasy, like slash fairy tale look. I guess it's it's fairy. Is this high? I'm gonna say fairy tale high fantasy hybrid. And also it just like, granted, graphical fidelity is not like, you know, the end all be all, but like just the fact that this game looks so goddamn beautiful even to this day, it's insane. Like, you guys remember me playing through this game. It's insane looking. Mini Ninjas with its, you know, cartoony, definitely, yeah, more, you know, yeah, it's more cartoony, more, you know, kid friendly, almost, you know, very late, yeah, like late 2000s CG animated show look, but like in a good way, not in like a weird, you know, oh, this is dated way. Like, because of its stylization, it stands out. It's pretty cool. Scribblenauts with its 2D flat, almost hand-drawn look, that makes it pretty distinct. Bayonetta with its, you know, sort of, you know, heavily, you know, Japanese influenced Heaven and Hell look that it has. And of course, Ratchet and Clank Crack in Time with its sort of, you know, beautiful-esque sci-fi look that pretty much complements the gameplay. So those are the choices. Again, games we already talked about, but you know how the show goes. So, in my opinion, the award for the best game with art direction from 2009 goes to Trine. This game is fucking beautiful. Like, how the hell this game is from the late 2000s? I don't know. I don't know. And again, it's not just the fact that it has a lot of really good lighting. It is a very stylized game that I think does complement the gameplay as well. Its fantasy aesthetic obviously resonates with me because I love fantasy games. But as far sorry, I'm hearing like a whistling sound, but anyways. But yeah, as far as like its fantasy motif, I think it works really well. And it helps that later on in the game it becomes a bit more of a gothic fantasy look. Which again complements the gameplay significantly. And again, if you are into puzzle platforming hybrid games, I'd recommend you guys check it out for yourselves. So that's at least my take on art direction. But what about narrative? Admittedly, this one was a bit tougher to choose because, as you probably saw, this year was a really good year for platforming games. Okay, I don't want to say it was a good year for platforming games. It was okay enough, though you can definitely tell, it was kind of in its waning years. It was a really good year for RPGs and a really good year for the sim strategy category. But notice how a lot of those games aren't necessarily... Oh, and also action adventure and shooter games was pretty... It was a pretty good year for shooter games as well. But you probably noticed, yeah, this year was just kind of not... There weren't really a lot of games that were good that were focused around narrative, per se. Well, let's just say that that's going to change here because... Okay, I found just enough games. And I think most people would agree with these here. Of course, Uncharted 2, Assassin's Creed 2, Dragon Age Origins, and Bayonetta. Of course, it makes sense as to why I would nominate all four of them. Of course, with, Uncharted 2, continuing the story of Nathan Drake and his escapades, while also dealing with a lot of just kind of, side drama, kind of alongside, and just sort of that, romantic tension coming around to him, I think works pretty well. With Bayonetta, just kind of, that sort of, dealing with the fact that, she is pretty much shunned by, the other angels, and just kind of coming to terms with that, I think is pretty compelling. With Assassin's Creed 2, of course, Ezio starting off as a bit of a, rebel, but learning to kind of respect his, position as a new member of the Assassin's Brotherhood, and just kind of coming to terms with being able to, take vengeance on those who wronged him. And then with Dragon Age Origins, of course, the compelling narrative of trying to, build up to stop this massive, demonic threat. That will, as well as, having those intimate character interactions, really, helping flesh out this narrative as it should. So that's at least where I'm ranking those from. But let's get into the winner. So I keep forgetting to put this in here. Goddamn. So here we go. So the winner for the best narrative of 2009 is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Finally, yeah, I finally gave an award to this game. You guys were thinking I was gonna snub this game, but nope. This game has the best narrative, and for good reason. So, the new characters, specifically Chloe Frazier, as well as the main villain and some of the other side characters that were brought in here, I think they were a very welcomed cast for this. Like as far as just kind of giving a bit more of a character depth to Nathan Drake, because admittedly with the first Uncharted, you can definitely say that like he is a bit more, I guess just the characters in general, like you can tell that they had like their distinct like personalities, but you can definitely say that there was a bit more that you could do with them. And well, they did just that with Uncharted 2. It also helps that this game has a much better villain overall. Lazarevich is better than Roman ever was in, the previous game, even if his boss fight is still kind of lame. But yeah, as a good continuation of the story of Nathan Drake, obviously in this case kind of following, the location of Shangri-La as opposed to the location of El Dorado, really does kind of, add to that sort of sense of being a treasure hunter. And well, obviously not to get into spoilers, but the stakes are definitely a bit raised in this game, especially considering that Lazarevich, as I've stated, is a much more intimidating threat, I would say. And well, I would definitely say that like some character arcs would start to kind of blossom around this, game here, and just sort of, Nathan himself kind of coming to terms to what he truly wants. So go check out our playthrough if you guys are interested in, seeing what I'm talking about. But that then gets us into the game of the year. So we've got some pretty good choices, I'd say, overall. So did the Game Awards at least recognize those specific choices? Yes and no. Again, as I said earlier on, if you like Batman Arkham Asylum and if you do like Modern Warfare 2, that is completely fine. It's just Batman Arkham Asylum is not for me, and I just am not the biggest fan of this particular Call of Duty. I just think there's much better games in that franchise. And again, there's very few instances in which I would genuinely say that Call of Duty deserves Game of the Year. This is not one of them. So it's a bit iffy for me to put it on here. That being said though, Uncharted 2 and Assassin's Creed 2, hell fucking yeah. Those two games definitely do deserve the praise that they get, and considering that like they're pretty good, shooter and action games respectively, and much improved versions of their previous titles. Yeah, I can see them being here. Left 4 Dead 2 though, that one's a tough one. That one's definitely a tough one. I don't know if there's enough for me to say that it completely warrants it, because I feel like with Game of the Year, you kind of have to represent, like, the game has to really represent, like, a big, impact on, like, culture at the time. So, I mean, to be fair, Left 4 Dead 2 does have that, but, like, I don't know, man. This one, I'd say it borderline could, but borderline. That being said, though, Uncharted 2 was the one that ended up winning, which, absolutely fair, but you can always improve a list. So, I would definitely say that, like, as far as Game of the Year, Uncharted 2, Bayonetta, Ratchet & Clank, Crack in Time, Assassin's Creed 2, and Dragon Origins, most people would definitely be good with me saying those 5 options, no doubt. Especially since they're more story driven overall and their gameplay is pretty solid. But I'm also going to give a good nod to The Sims 3 because I do think that The Sims 3 has held up even to this day. And like I said, I do genuinely think it's the best Sims game. And if you want to have like a game that was a part of the cultural zeitgeist at the time, I would argue that The Sims 3, I think, has a bit of a better case overall, at least for me personally. So you can definitely disagree with me there, but it just felt wrong not to include it. Because let's just say that, like, you know, spoiler alert, I don't know if I feel confident to have the other Sims games as Game of the Year. But I do with this game. So, and by the way, notice that all of these games, we have given them awards. So one of them is going to come out with a second trophy tonight. It's just a matter of which game. Though, if you guys have noticed the pattern, that should like kind of determine on which games are more likely to get wins and which ones aren't. So, but let's of course get ready for the final winner of the night. So, here we go. The last trophy, the last award. Here we go. So, the award for the Game of the Year of 2009 for the Caspian Game Awards goes to Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Well, damn. I agree with the Game Awards somehow. But yeah, no, I do think that, like, overall, if you're gonna make a good case for what deserves to be best game to represent, I would say that Uncharted 2 overall is the best package. I mean, first of all, it is cinematic bliss. As far as, like, you know, improving upon your gameplay, like, as far as your story and your narrative and even, like, just straight up dialogue, yeah, no, Uncharted 2 is leagues above the first game in both of those respects. And it helps that, like, this game, especially with its narrative being set in, like, Southern Asia, I think really at least makes me gravitate more towards the story rather than El Dorado, because I find Shangri-La to be a much more interesting, locale. And even just the climbing, parkour, puzzles, I find to be way more fun in this game than in the first game. Especially inside the temple in the city. Oh my god, that was a pretty good one. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much for you guys. But yeah, and again, combat, I would definitely say it is pretty good in this game. Like, the first game can feel a bit, dated as far as, like, some of the controls, but it is much better to control in this game. I know I didn't necessarily put this in the best shooter category. I gave it to Red Faction Guerrilla, but part of that is because, even though I do think that, like, this game's combat is good, I don't think it's quite as good in comparison to some other games. This game is really carried by its narrative and its climbing parkour sections, which of course this game honestly has a really good narrative. And, well, you could make a really good case that as far as PlayStation 3 games are concerned, this was the best game of that era of, like, the PlayStation 3, and does prove that there is a bit of weight to, the PS3. At least in comparison to somewhat like what other people like to argue. And, well, last but not least, I know it's not a point on here, but admittedly, this is probably my favorite Uncharted game. 4 is still pretty good. I just find this to be like the perfect length for what they were trying to go for. And I just find the locales and I just find the locale and like the treasure to be a bit more interesting in this game as opposed to the one in Uncharted 4. And I don't know, I just find the dynamic, to be fair, the dynamic between Nathan and Elena are pretty good in both games. I talked about it before, where it's like, I do feel like, as far as like fictional like gaming relationships are concerned, I actually do find Nathan and Elena's relationship to be one that obviously shifts and turns, but it's done in a natural way to where it feels genuine. And this game definitely showcases that pretty strong, like in a pretty strong way. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, this is definitely a game that I would say deserves the game of the year. But of course, we got to recap. So here's the awards that we gave out. Best game by new studio went to Bayonetta. Best platform game went to Ratchet & Clank Future Crack in Time. Best action adventure went to Assassin's Creed 2. Best RPG went to Dragon Age Origins. Best shooter game went to Red Faction Guerrilla. Best sim strategy game went to The Sims 3. Best sports racing fighting game went to Forza Motorsport 3. Best multiplayer went to Left 4 Dead 2. Best DLC expansion went to Wizard 101's Grizzleheim. Best art direction went to Trine. And of course, the best narrative and the titular game of the year went to Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. As far as my personal top favorites of 2009, I'd say these are like the ones that I would say are like my personal favorites. Yeah, Trine, Bayonetta, Crack in Time, Assassin's Creed 2, Dragon Age Origins, Halo Wars, Red Faction Guerrilla, Sims 3, Uncharted 2, and then Tropico 3. So, pretty good selection of games. And then, of course, just like before, not only would I say that like a lot of these games are admittedly kind of games that I feel like I left out as guilty pleasures, but I would also consider plenty of these to be honorable mentions. So there is admittedly one game that I did forget to add. So let me just add that quickly. Because I even forgot this was technically a 2009 game, which is why I didn't do it for 2010. So, oh shoot, no, I want you to be. Oh shoot, no. Yeah, I'm actually like trying to do this. But yeah, you see what's on the screen. Basically, yeah, I would say, yeah, I have Lord of the Rings Conquest on there, which, yes, was also made by Pandemic, but it wasn't really one of their more successful games. It was supposed to be like, their version of like, supposed to be like the Lord of the Rings version of like Star Wars Battlefront, but it never really ended up doing that, which is unfortunate. But I still find the game to be fun in short bursts. Then yeah, we have Fear 2 Project Origins. Not as good as the original Fear, but like I would still say is good in its own right. Funny enough, Empire Total War. I would say this game it's deeply flawed, but I still like playing the game on the the campaign side of things, even if it's hella easy. Resident Evil 5, I know it's inferior. Resident Evil 4, but like I can still enjoy it. I don't think it's like the worst Resident Evil game. And then yeah, Call of Juarez, Bound for Blood. A much better game than the first Call of Juarez for sure. Not as good as Gunslinger, but still pretty cool. Hearts of Iron 3, of course, for obvious reasons. Wolfenstein 2009. People, Bethesda themselves actually fucking hate this game, and there's some people who criticize it. I think it's fine. Definitely not the best shooter game out there, which is why, of course, I didn't nominate it. Guitar Hero 5 and Band Hero are also here, mostly because Guitar Hero and like pretty much kind of, helped me get into a lot of the music that I talked to you guys about. Though also because I don't know what category to put that in, because it's not really like you're simulating like a guitar, but it's not like obviously like a sport either, so it wouldn't work for sim strategy, and it wouldn't work for sports racing and fighting either. So yeah, and then we got this game over here, Wings of Prey. It's actually called IL-2 Sturmovik Wings of Prey. They just dropped the IL-2 Sturmovik from it for whatever reason. Dead Space Extraction was a thing, a rail shooter, which I thought was pretty cool. Star Wars Battlefront Elite Squadron. Critics hated this game. And yes, this, funny enough, was originally the PSP version of the canceled Star Wars Battlefront 3 by Free Radical before that was canceled. Yeah, this is essentially like what the game was originally supposed to be, or at least in its condensed PSP form. So I have a little bit of respect for it, even if it's not the greatest game in the world. I still find it to be pretty cool, what if sort of time capsule. And I remember getting it back in the day. I still have the thing down there, actually, as a matter of fact. Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, just kind of as a thing for a little bit of more Nintendo representation, and of course I've been getting into a lot of Zelda. And then of course right behind me, Stalker Call of Pripyat, which yes, did come out in 2009 in Europe. In North America it came out in 2010, but again, I count releases like original releases. I don't count like North American releases. But in any event, I get a lot of guilty pleasure / honorable mentions, though I will say overall I would say that like the quality of these are not as strong as 2010s. Like, the 2010 honorable mentions / guilty pleasures. These mostly are more so just kind of guilty pleasures of mine personally that I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to. But anyways, that was the 2009 Caspian Game of the Year Awards. So overall, again, a pretty damn good year. Definitely top 5 that we've covered thus far. That being said, though, 2008, I'm not particularly looking forward to. Not that it was like a terrible year, but like, I don't remember it being the most exciting year either. I remember it kind of being pretty mid. So definitely stay tuned for that. And of course, if you guys enjoyed what you got, if you guys enjoyed what you guys saw, make sure to hit the follow button down below and turn the bell icon if you're watching this on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down below. Or, yeah, sorry. I just had a complete brain issue. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn the bell icon as such. And of course, check out the links down below as well, specifically the Discord, the SoundCloud, and the YouTube affiliation link. Or the Humble Bundle affiliation link, excuse me. God, I am tired right now. Those directly support me in the long run. And if you're watching this on Twitch and you haven't already, I would highly encourage you guys hit that subscribe button down there. If you can't do that, that is completely fine. I'm so glad that you guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well, and continue to be awesome people in the process. Until then, though, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, guys. Peace out.